around. My name is Evan Endress. I'm a project manager with PennFuture, and you're going to hear a lot of pens today, so I think maybe I'll real quick just map it out. I'm with PennFuture. We're a statewide advocacy group, but specifically I'm with the PennFuture Energy Center. And in the Energy Center, our specific interest is energy savings and renewable energy. And we have an initiative called, this is your second pen of the day, PennSave. And PennSave is a program that we've been running for about 2 years now that's designed to educate municipalities and school districts about the opportunities involved in energy efficiency contracting through guaranteed energy savings. And we've been doing that for about 2 years, and maybe you've attended some of our other programs or projects in the past. But the next and greatest opportunity in the state of Pennsylvania, right, and especially right now, is the third pen, which is PennSEF, and probably the most important pen of the day. So PennSEF is the Pennsylvania Sustainable Energy Fund, and our guests today, who are going to be taking over this meeting in a minute, are really going to be diving into the meat of that program. So I really want to welcome you here today, and thanks for making the trip. I know many of you were at the PASBO conference last week and have had just a whole string of conferences to start your spring out. But I just want to take a moment to recognize the Pennsylvania Association of Intermediate Units, for whom many of you probably received this notification about this meeting through them. They've been a great partner in putting this together. The Lincoln Area Intermediate Unit as well, and then the Capital Area Intermediate Unit. So it's really great to have these organizations communicating with your school districts about the opportunities and programs that are available out there, without which I think that they may not be on the radar. So I'm going to turn it over to Keith Welks of the Pennsylvania Treasury in a moment here.
Pen.
Another pen, that's right. Are you PennTrez now?
PennTrez.
PennTrez. So I'll just give you a quick layout of the day. You have before you deep expertise in energy efficiency and particularly surrounding this program. And I think their presentation will probably be about 45 minutes, if not a little bit shorter. But really, we want to challenge the audience today to ask important questions, questions that pertain to your school district or your nonprofit, your public entity. I will note that we are recording this for the purposes of disseminating it out to your colleagues statewide that may not be in the room today. So putting yourself in their shoes, what questions would my colleagues from school district in Wilkes-Barre area or someone else, what would they ask? I challenge you to ask those questions and really put these guys to the test today, because the more questions are asked and answered, the better and more complete the program will be to folks that will maybe view it in the next couple weeks via an online video recording. So about noon, we'll be doing lunch, and then after lunch, we'll take time for some more questions and discussion, okay? So I'll turn it over to Keith Welks, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Evan. Really appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. We're glad you're here. Let me say that it's a somewhat small group. Unfortunately, it's a kind of hierarchical structure to the room. It's a room usually used by lawyers. I've actually sat in this room and been in your shoes. I'm hoping you will not be as bored today as I've often been in the seats you're sitting in now. So I'm almost certain I can't persuade you to move forward. I understand the desire to be as far away from someone who might call upon you to participate as possible. But if I can encourage people to sort of engage with us, having a conversation is always more useful. It's more interesting to us. It's probably more useful to you. So we'd like to do this in as informal and as casual a way as we can. And so loosen up. Stand up, do a couple of jumping jacks, whatever you want to, because a conversation is going to be much more valuable. Thank you very much for coming. We invited you here today to, we hope, hear about a very exciting program that will provide financing and technical assistance for energy efficiency projects at your facilities. You've probably heard about a lot of programs that offer ostensibly similar benefits and attributes. I'm here to tell you, as well as everyone else on the panel, that this is probably different than any other program you've heard before. As Evan said, I'm with the Pennsylvania Treasury Department. I'm joined by Pat Shaughnessy, who has moved, I'm sorry, who used to be up here with us and has already decided it's not going as well as he would like. So Pat and I are from the Pennsylvania Treasury Department. We are essentially the people who are bringing you this program. Just 30 seconds on our role in all of this. The Pennsylvania Treasury Department is a sort of an element of the state government. It's created by the state constitution. We have a whole variety of roles that I'm not going to tell you about. The one that's most relevant here is that we are responsible for investing the Commonwealth's assets when they're not used for paying bills or other purposes. And so as an investor, we're always looking for smart places to place those assets in order to generate a return and protect principal. When we can, we love to do those two things, protect principal and generate a return, and also deliver something of benefit to the Pennsylvania economy, to vulnerable populations, to communities in Pennsylvania. This is one of those opportunities as we see it. We think that the potential for schools and universities and regional governments and local governments and state governments and nonprofits, hospitals, to affect energy efficiency savings, save money, reduce carbon emissions, reduce consumption of fossil fuels, and otherwise do all those good things associated with environmental protection is right here in our grasp. We've put together a great team who's going to talk about this. Baird Brown's going to start. He's from Drinker Biddle. After that, John Byrne is going to talk about his special areas. He's from the University of Delaware. They'll then flip-flop back and forth on which slide they're talking about. And at the end of this, we think you're going to learn that these projects can be done more simply, with a lot more support than you ever would have expected, and that they will pay for themselves. In fact, the essence of this program is we're not able to finance a program if it doesn't pay for itself. And therefore, it should have no budgetary impact on however you run your operation. So I think that's all I need to say or want to say. I'm going to start at this point, turn it over to Baird, and I'm going to sort of slink back into my critical role as operator of the keyboard here. And I've been assured that if I only touch two buttons, the right arrow and the left arrow, nothing can go awry. I've proven in the past that that's not necessarily correct, but every day is a new opportunity to improve. So with that, Baird, please lead us forward.
Thank you, Keith. Why don't we go to the key program features, the first slide.
So far, so good, by the way.
Awesome. Let me second the thought that that you should jump in and ask questions as we go along. We usually like to do this if we can in a sort of a big horseshoe shape. We didn't get that lucky, but I encourage you to jump in. What we're trying to accomplish here is a sort of a 6-step program to end addiction to fossil energy. We start as a team by pre-qualifying a group of local and national energy service companies, or ESCOs. In other words, we've gone out, and this has happened, and you can find it on our website, and our website is right at the bottom of every page in the book you have in front of us, so it's very easy to find. It comes right up if you Google. And these are people who we've taken and we've looked at their financials, we've looked at how they can, what their track record is on doing energy efficiency projects, and we're saying that these are folks that we believe can live up to the promises that we're asking them to make on behalf of the program. We work with them and with you using standardized documentation that facilitates the pooled financing that we're going to be working toward. And we have had the chance to sort of perfect that documentation over time. We actually started with documents that were put together by the Pennsylvania Department of General Services. That was 5 years ago when we did our first deal like this in Delaware, which was 5 state agencies and 2 state higher education institutions. And we've been evolving it. We've worked in California, and now we're here, and we keep trying to make it into a more and more transparent and user-friendly document. And it spells out a strong guarantee and a marketing and verification plan, which you'll hear more about from my colleague, Dr. Byrne here, that is the guts of the program, so that you will get the savings. The guarantee is based on energy and water savings alone. There may be other kinds of operational savings. There may be, but we're not, and especially if you had deferred maintenance and we're spending a lot of money on fixing old equipment, there may be substantial other savings, but we're looking at something from a rating agency point of view and a bond issuance point of view where we can say, yeah, the savings that are guaranteed by the ESCO are going to carry this. And we're here, I was waiting for Keith to say, we're from the Pennsylvania Treasury and we're here to help you. Their job is not, among the many, is not collecting money. That's another state agency. We're here to assist with the negotiations, make sure that you get those parts that are individualized right. So let's move on to the benefits. What we ask the ESCOs who participate in the program is that they provide you with a preliminary audit at no cost. And then once you make a selection, a final selection of an ESCO, which comes after that step, that is if you like the preliminary audit, they will do an investment grade audit, and that has to offer savings that are at least 90% of what that preliminary audit was, or else you pay nothing for it. In other words, we're trying to avoid any chance of bait and switch here. They need to come into you with an honest estimation from the very beginning. All the program costs are paid from within the bond issue. So you not only never pay for the preliminary audit, but the investment grade audit, assuming you go forward with a project and with the financing, the costs are rolled into the financing. So it's sort of no money down and start saving as soon as construction is complete. There is no cross-collateralization or risk associated with the involvement of other participants. Although we get the benefit, the efficiencies of a pooled financing, you owe for your own project, your funds for your project are there for you only, and there's no, you operate entirely independently of everybody else. The only thing that is pooled is the actual collected payments that go to the bondholders. And we can customize that payment plan for you. In other words, right now you're going to hear about the interest rates. They're extraordinarily low at the short end of the spectrum and just only very low at the long end of the spectrum. But if you have some things that pay for themselves in 3 years, you can pay for those in 3 years. If you have boilers or major HVAC changes that pay for themselves for 15 or 20 years, you can have those go out 15 or 20 years, and we'll just add together the appropriate payment periods that you select for those different options, and that's what your payment stream will be. It doesn't have to be level debt service. You don't have to necessarily carry things that have one conservation measure infect another in that regard. And we also expect the job creation from these programs is the highest of any capital expenditures in the energy area that you can make. It stands to reason you're working in existing fabric. It's somewhat complicated. It takes some handwork, and these are jobs that can't be exported. So next slide, act now. You reduce costs. You replace aging high-maintenance equipment, you improve safety and resiliency, reduce operating costs, and reduce your carbon footprint. And with that, I hand it over to my colleague, John Byrne, who in addition to working at the University of Delaware is with the Foundation for Renewable Energy and the Environment, whose logo you see at the bottom of the slides, and that organization is the organization that's carrying out the lead contractor for the program here.
Thank you very much, and good morning. And we do believe spring is coming, although I understand we're going to have another experience with winter before spring comes. But in any case, hopefully we'll see. This is a pretty day today, I'd say, for Central PA. So very nice.
Bigotry of low expectations once again.
So as Baird mentioned, I'm with the foundation, and my colleagues Pam Haig, who is at the back of the room, and Bruce Stoltz, who had a central role in the DGS program previously offered by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They are both here to help answer questions and get you information that you might need. So my job at this point is to sort of validate that claim that we're going to actually save you money. And the basis for doing that is fairly detailed studies that have been done on the energy efficiency market. And this one is on electricity. We could show you similar things for gas, for water savings, and so on. The thin bars are the bars that people pay in order to purchase electricity. So the top of the bar is what residential ratepayers pay. The bottom of the thin bar is what industrial customers pay. And that process going across the country, you can see, has a cost that's somewhere between 8, 10, 12, 14 cents kilowatt hour, depending upon where you are. What's important is those blue boxes that are at the bottom, okay, the wider blue boxes. Those are the all-in costs, not simply sort of rebates or buy-downs on loans or whatever. What does it cost you to save a kilowatt hour of electricity? And that's done through some fairly careful studies that USEIA, Energy Information Administration, collects this data on an annual basis from all of the utilities in the country. There are additional laboratory, Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory and others who feed in databases to this. This is an all-in cost. And what I think you can see from the graph is it doesn't matter where you live in the country, but it's really good where we live. The cost stays about the same. You can save a kilowatt hour for somewhere between 2 and 4 cents a kilowatt hour. You're going to pay something north of 10 cents a kilowatt hour to use it. So why not capture that difference? Why not take that difference between saving and using, and use that as the basis for defining the investment that you'll make in your facilities? And that is key to the economics of this particular program. The program has additional advantages that it brings to you that Baird has already noted, and I'm just going to get to them very shortly. There is low financing in the world today, and I think the Federal Reserve Chairman has somewhat indicated that will stick around for us at least through the summer. So it's a really good time to make the investments in your facilities because the cost of inviting investors in is quite low at this time. The program is set up to help you with long-term financing, so that if this is built on a program that we originally did in Delaware that had an average payback period of just north of just about 14 years. It was a 20-year bond issuance, and the average payback was 14 years. A lot of entities got solutions to what are often very difficult problems. You don't have capital budgets of unlimited amount and so on. This is a really good program for helping you. But what's important, as you'll see, the program needs a flow of revenue from the immediate term that can save you money quickly, like lighting improvements, okay, to things that will take longer. You put those together, create a revenue stream that is constantly providing you benefit, like those two bars indicate. You get that, you monetize that, you now get to do a full suite of appliances or pieces of equipment for that purpose. You'll be in a pool, as Baird indicated. There's no cross subsidization. There's no problem with you having to somehow incur the cost of others, but you get the benefit of the pool. That is, the costs of preparing the transaction are spread over a larger group, and therefore projects we've worked with school districts in the past, a lot of times this is difficult for a school district on its own to go to the most efficient capital market we have, the tax-exempt bond market. Very difficult to go there, but in a pool, everybody gets the advantages without having the burdens of subsidies and that kind of thing. As we will talk later when we get to the M&V, there is a leveraging opportunity here for you. It allows you to negotiate for a better deal, and I'm going to give you an example of that when we get to M&V. The indicative rates, we post the indicative rates on a regular basis that the program is looking at by rating class and by term. As you can see, it's not going to get too much better than this, I think, ever. Anyway, this is the time to invite private investors to come in and put the funds underneath the investments you need in your facilities and use that capital instead for maybe mission-specific needs that you might have. For example, in schools, my wife, longtime special ed school teacher, never enough books sometimes in classrooms, never enough materials, never enough of a lot of things that are important to children that don't get. Use the money for that, and use the private sector to invest for these kinds of opportunities. Who can participate? As Baird already noted, this is just a laundry list so that you have everybody in this room or the clients you represent can participate. We are particularly interested in the school districts, universities, schools, and hospitals, municipalities, and so on. So this will be a public and nonprofit sector-based investment process. Putting private sector investment into our public purpose is a key goal of this particular program. And finally, what measures are in? Anything that will reduce your energy or your water bill. All energy, so it can electricity, natural gas, propane, heating oil, whatever it is, and water. Anything that does that. That can include, in certain instances, on-site generation. For example, if you have the kind of facility demand that a combined heat and power unit makes sense, we have financed that kind of activity also. There may be some renewable energy options that are on site that you are interested in. We have done that in the past as well. So anything that by that investment reduces your energy bill, reduces your water bill to a point where the investment cost and debt service all in can be financed from that saving, okay? Put the savings to work to get the improvements. And that's sort of the piece that I'm supposed to deliver at this point. Now Baird's going to walk you through the steps of how participation takes place.
Okay, so I said 6 steps. Here's 8 steps. The way you begin is to provide a non-binding letter of interest that allows you to begin discussions with the free team. And don't look now, but at the back of your book underneath, not bound in, is a copy of what that letter looks like. It basically explains how the program works and says, yes, I'm interested in proceeding to find an ESCO and get a preliminary audit. It commits you to nothing long term and no expenditure other than your time and energy in helping getting enough information for the ESCO to audit. And you and the program will make sure that there's enough information that the ESCO can do that. We will put on, when we have sufficient folks signed up with letters of interest, an education day. That will be an extended version of the discussion, because by the time you've sort of gotten to the preliminary audit, you're probably deeper into the process. It'll lay things out in more detail, but it also gives you a chance to meet all the ESCOs that have been qualified by the program. They'll come and set up booths. They'll be happy to talk to you. They'll get introduced. Then you have to, we've sort of left out the procurement and the selection of the ESCO to do an audit really work together, steps 3 and 4. But you get the information together. That's step 3, and step 4 is you send out an RFP, and we have a template RFP that you work with, although it's very much your RFP, and you have to sort of think about what your particular needs are in terms of schedule and in terms of particular needs your buildings have, and that you want to accomplish. And one of the things that's true here is that you're allowed under the statute to do about 15% of the overall project that isn't directly aimed at energy savings. So if you need to have a better roof before you put solar on top and things like that, there are sometimes ways to do that. So then the pre-contract audit, as I said, sets up a benchmark. It says, okay, you're going to do at least within 90% of this. If you like that pre-contract audit, you go ahead and sign a guaranteed savings agreement, and that agreement is a sort of a 2-step process. It provides for the investment grade audit, and it also provides for the construction period. But the investment grade audit is not just an audit, it's actually a detailed negotiation of the conservation measures that will be installed, the exact equipment, the exact pricing. All of that comes out of the audit in the form of schedules that will then be attached to the guaranteed savings agreement and will drive the construction process. Yes?
Are there two separate documents, an IGA agreement with the trust, and then a guarantee?
No, there's actually, the way we've set it up, there's one agreement that provides for both, and that's set up that way based on the way the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act in Pennsylvania reads. It sort of contemplates that they would be combined. But it really is a two-step process. If you don't like the audit at the end, you don't have to go forward with construction. You know, the construction only happens if you agree on an audit. If an audit comes in and it does in fact promise 90% of what the savings were going to be, and you were in the preliminary audit and you decide not to go forward anyway, you would have an obligation to pay for a portion of the cost of that audit. Other than that, if you go forward, as I said before, the cost would just be rolled in to the overall structure. So it works as if there were two contracts, but for legal reasons we've stuck them together. If you like the proposal, and that's they come in with a proposal, the audit comes in with a whole set of schedules that are basically drafts of the schedules that are going to be attached to the guaranteed savings agreement. But those are negotiable schedules, and that's in fact what happens next. And one of the things that the team is prepared to help with is make sure that in the M&V schedule they don't try and take away what they gave you in the upfront in the contract. You know, and other things that have occasionally been known to happen, notwithstanding our best efforts. So we'll work with that, and you know, because we're seeing kind of all the proposals come in, we get a sense of we're able to benchmark the proposals against each other and say, okay, you know, what they're charging over here for HVAC, it has no relationship to what they're charging over here. What they're charging over here for measurement and verification looks totally unlike what they're charging over here, and we can point that out to folks, and oftentimes we can get people to say, oh, okay, we understand, and get it right. Assuming you get through that negotiation, you say, okay, we're fine, you move to the second phase of the guaranteed savings agreement. The work is performed. You get to supervise, you get to check off everything. There's a schedule of payment values that you have to certify to the bond trustee that the work's been done in accordance with what you agreed on before the bond trustee makes payment. You know, works like a real construction contract. And then when it's done, there's acceptance testing for the equipment. Has to work like it's meant to work before you make the final payments. And then you go into the period of operation. Usually you're doing the operating, but the verification process will proceed on a regular basis. Sort of stepping back into the middle of that about the procurement process, the Pennsylvania Guaranteed Energy Savings Act provides for, it's a little quirky, but it provides for a very flexible procurement process. Rather than having to do what you would normally have to do in a procurement, which is separate everything out into 3 different trade specialties and issue 3 different contracts, each one to the lowest bidder. You can do a single contract with the ESCO, who acts as the general contractor, and that can be let not on a price basis alone, although obviously you care about price, but on other characteristics that you find important and set out in your RFP. So you issue the RFP, you review the bidding, that what people say they can do, and you pick one ESCO to go ahead and do that preliminary audit as a part of the procurement process. And when the preliminary audit is done, and if you're satisfied, that's the point at which you're making the actual procurement decision, and signing a guaranteed energy savings agreement. Yes?
Hold on, I'm going to ask that folks use a mic for questions so that we can pick it up. So I don't mind, if you don't mind repeating your question. Thanks.
Yes. If you use an ESCO that's not that has not been pre-approved by PennFuture, would you still be? Can you still be involved in your guys' program?
What we ask is, the answer is you can bring an ESCO to the program. We ask that ESCO then go through the qualification process. We want to know that we, don't have bad actors in the program. But, assuming you've got a reputable ESCO and want to bring them to the process, absolutely.
Okay, so eligibility is rolling. I saw on the website
Yes.
there were certain dates that you guys opened it for, but moving forward it'll be a rolling.
Yes.
Always been.
Yeah,
Okay.
we won't necessarily sort of, what we've done up till now when we had a lot of applications is sort of do them in batches.
Yes.
If we get, one or two more, we'll probably just sort of do them as they come by. Yeah, we're open to that on a stepped basis, if not a rolling basis.
The Education Day event, I wasn't quite clear on that. Is it my understanding that you plan to hold an event after you receive so many letters of interest from participants, or is that just something that's going to occur on a certain calendar date regardless? I wasn't
No,
quite clear.
it's absolutely when we have enough folks evincing interest that we think we are certain. What we'd like to do, what we need to do to make an efficient bond issue is probably get to 25 or 30 million. We might be able to go a little lower. We've had people propose projects to us already that sort of single-handedly would get us halfway there. And if three of those happened, we'd already be well over that. In Delaware, in a state of 800,000 people, we were able to do 70 million on a first bond issue. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to muster a much larger bond issue. The larger it gets, the less the cost is per bond to set up, the financing. But, we will not wait forever. We'll try and get moving. And so as soon as we know we have enough interest that we're likely to be rolling to a financing on a schedule we can predict, that's when we'll hold the day.
And my second question was, is there a max or cap on that return on investment, or is that tied to the bond? I know for our school board, we've done ESCO projects, and we weren't going to consider one if it had more than a 20-year payback. Is there a cap on that? Is it 20, or can it be carried out further?
There's actually a cap of 20 years in the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act for payback. So, and you have to have that. If the ESCO wants to make a guarantee that goes longer than that, you probably can talk to them. But that's how long the financing can go, and how and you have to make a finding, as it were, that you have to be comfortable that the savings are going to pay for the bond cost over the period of the bonds. Sure.
Hello.
Yes.
Is there a limit to how much can be financed for any individual entity?
No. Well, only a lower limit. Um, the lower limit is not hard and fast, but to make this work, we need to have not 50 $500,000 projects. You know, the administration would overwhelm it. So what we're trying to make sure we do is hold at least some portion of the financing open to comparatively smaller projects, down to maybe $500,000. But if you've got a $25 million project, we're just delighted.
Second question. A lot of the renewable energy projects require tax benefits, credits, et cetera, to make economics work. You're talking about mostly nonprofits, so if the nonprofit is the financed entity, the tax credits go by the wayside. Are you looking at any hybrid arrangements for?
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I've done 5 megawatts of solar for Princeton University and 8 megawatts for Rutgers University, and you know, we understand how to structure for that. That's what we're prepared to do. I don't think we have sat down and sort of worked through the details, but one of the partners in the program who is not here with us today, Ken Becker, spent 30 years as an investment banker in the municipal group with Citibank. He and now has his own organization. Among other things, he's partners in an organization that provides tax equity for such things. Whether it will think it's appropriate for his own organization to provide equity, or whether he needs to reach out and be more competitive, those are questions we haven't sort of crossed yet, but I think we won't have trouble. So we've pretty much, I think, talked through the issues about the procurement process. You make a decision to sign the agreement, and as I said, if you don't like the results of that audit, you can walk away and start over. The next slide. You're doing really well, Keith, I gotta say. This is flawless performance.
I'm sure you've jinxed me.
Yeah. This is a brief diagram of the financing structure. Participants would enter into, down there in the red at the bottom, would enter into the guaranteed savings agreement with the ESCO in green over at the right. And they would also simultaneously, the guaranteed savings agreement would be conditioned, the construction phase would be conditioned on getting the financing done. So that, again, there's no obligation if the financing doesn't occur. They would enter into a lease with the issuer, who we expect to be PEDFA, the Pennsylvania Economic Development Finance Authority, another PEN in the group. They would enter into an indenture with the trustee. The important thing about the indenture, I think I mentioned already, is that there's separate construction accounts for every project. You're not at mercy if somebody else's project turns out to be more expensive because they didn't understand there was a lot of asbestos where they were going to start tearing things apart, or for whatever reason. Your funds for your project which is you've gotten a fixed price bid for, are sitting there. There's no reason to run out of money unless you decide that the project has to change.
Got a question in the back.
Yes.
It's our first repeat question.
Takes a second to get the signal.
Just one question. The term lease, that's an interesting use of term. That still will affect, like I'm on a school board, that still would affect our borrowing capacity, right? It's not a lease as like, do you know how that would affect our finance? That would still show up as debt.
Yeah, let me explain exactly. Yeah, this is a good question to get out on the table. It's a lease, because that's essentially a form of financing agreement. The Guaranteed Energy Savings Act requires that lease and that payment be subject to appropriations. So this is not debt within the meaning of the Local Government Unit Debt Act, and does not affect your debt ceiling, because each year there have to be annual appropriations from whoever your appropriator is in order to make the payments. That said, for purposes of your balance sheet, it will look like debt, and for purposes of ratings, we've been going through a process. It's an ongoing process of educating the rating agencies. I think at this point, the rating agencies think of this as a moderate plus. In other words, they think it's good management that you're undertaking these energy saving measures, and they don't think of it as piling debt on your books. They see it as an overall reduction in your spend, and they'll look at least modestly favorably on it. But that's, as I said, that's an ongoing conversation with the rating agencies. So there's, when people ask this question, they sometimes have 6 different things in mind, and the answer is different for each one of them.
The next question is, would you be willing to have that discussion with a rating agency?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Oh, he answered.
Yes. Well, it's better for the tape to get it on.
I'm just going to leave it on at this point.
Yeah, right.
The question was, would PennCef be willing to have that broker that conversation, right? Was that
Yes.
the question? And the answer is yes. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, and the one other thing that's on this slide is the program agreement. That's an agreement between the ESCO, yourselves, and the program, and it basically assures that data about the energy savings and the performance of the measures that you install gets back to the program, where we can supply it both to the state for their ongoing use, but also this is, in the larger effort to bring energy efficiency to the country, being able to explain to people that this stuff works and have good data is very, very important. And so that's what that's really about, is being able to tell people 3 years after the fact, yes, it worked well, and people aren't going to evaluate your program on whether they like the sound of the fan. They're going to see real numbers and be able to address it. So we've talked, turning to the next slide, a fair amount about the Guaranteed Energy Savings Agreement. I think we've probably covered almost all the points on this page. Are there other questions that people have about what goes into the Guaranteed Savings Agreement at this point?
The program agreement, both the participant and the ESCO are required to report that information to Free or PennCef.
Yes.
Is that for the life, basically that, like I'm familiar with M&V, will there be a requirement that they're reporting that annually or quarterly or?
Well, we'll get to the M&V, but we do require quarterly.
Yes.
And yes, we want to get that data. JB will explain why we want it quarterly. It's not so much we want it quarterly, we want you to have it quarterly.
That's right.
So you can think about it quarterly as opposed to waiting until something went wrong at the end of the year.
I think did we have another question? I think you got a question on the visa.
Yeah.
Do you factor in the life cycle of the equipment? So in other words, if we have a 20-year guarantee, but they're putting in equipment that lasts 15 years, it's not a good deal. Do you guys help us with that? Do you guys factor that in? Do you guys already have parameters set that you see a project come across and this is a 12-year piece of equipment and they're trying to finance it for 16 years? What kind of assistance can you give us with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, we will certainly help you evaluate that to the extent of the information we have. But the whole principle here, behind the underwriting and what we're telling the rating agencies is that the savings will be there for the amount of time that particular conservation measure is financed for. So we're not encouraging people to take out a 20-year loan on a 3-year lighting fixture. I was listening as I drove up on the radio to how the average car loan is starting to go out to 6 or 7 years, and people are saying that's crazy. You shouldn't be doing that. This same goes for your building.
The notion of the ESCO providing a guarantee, when you go back to the flow chart, if you could, the ESCO is sort of in this, I assume the GSA, this is an agreement to do the construction or do whatever needs to be done to create the energy savings. What happens when it all goes south and they just didn't get it right? And the ESCO, and the participant has guaranteed lease payments, and it doesn't happen because the ESCO missed it by a mile.
Well, that's the purpose of doing the pre-qualification of the ESCOs, and why
I'm trying to establish, after the bonds have been issued, the payments are being made, the ESCO goes out of business or changes names or is bought or goes away, and my college is sitting there with a guarantee that doesn't. I'm curious to what is the agreement saying about what does the guarantee mean in real terms over the life of the bond issue?
Well, I think the answer I was starting to give is exactly the answer that I'm going to still give, which is that the only you can never be sure that large American corporations won't go bankrupt. They do that sometime. However, there is a serious level of review of the financial and the performance, financial background and performance on these contracts of the ESCOs that we agree can be in the program. And so it is our best guess that it is reasonable our best estimation is a better way to put it, that it's reasonable to contract with these folks and rely on their guarantee. We can't promise that. We're not. We are. There is at least one ESCO who's participating in the program based not on its long history of doing business, but on the fact that it's bringing in a third-party AA rated, AA rated insurance company that backs up the guarantee, and that's something that we think is a good plan under those circumstances. But that it is.
So let's assume the company's still in business. There is some sort of recourse that the participant would have with all of the ESCOs, or just with some of them? You'd have to sort of dig around.
The guaranteed
so you dig
savings
around
agreement.
And find the one
The
that
agreement
has it.
provides for. In fact, if things go wrong during construction, what it provides for is that you can fire them and bring on another person to fix it, and they have to pay the difference to allow you to fix it and get it right. So your legal remedies under the agreement are solid. There is always a credit question, but it's not just an evaluation that we're doing of is their credit good as best we can, but it's also, do they know how to perform this kind of a project? And that the answer is, when you get with most of the folks who are in this program, they've done a lot of these over the years, and what they're doing for any one of these projects. I mean, these are ESCOs who have done the Empire State Building. They can probably do a school.
The contracts that is this box GSA, are they separate and distinct and different for each ESCO, or is there a program contract?
It's the standard program contract.
Okay,
We
good.
make them take our form of agreement, but the individual measures and the individual measurement verification that goes with each of those measures all gets negotiated individual project by project.
Could I just enlarge on that for 1 second? Because the point that Baird made about the one ESCO, where we've said because of its relative newness to this field, should back up its work with a third-party insurance contract, that could be done in any context. I mean, just to be absolutely clear, you could have the biggest ESCO on the planet who has 100% bulletproof track record, and if for whatever reason you wanted not only that belt but suspenders, you could arrange, presuming the product is available in the marketplace, and these products are increasingly available, you could still arrange to have a fallback or a fail-safe, in your structure. It would add additional cost, but that would be an option that a participant could certainly choose to pursue if for some reason it needed that additional assurance.
Well, in fact, it's a requirement of the statute that there be a construction bond as well. So, I mean, you will have a bonded construction process. You know, so there's already one level of insurance in the sense of a backup. If they fall through on construction, you have a bonding company to come in and look at it. Yes.
I'm sure the agreement states that if the savings are not met, that the ESCO needs to make those payments for you,
That's
or makes the difference of the payment for you.
That's correct.
So there.
Yeah.
Yes, that is the agreement.
Yeah, that is exactly the agreement.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's maybe what he was getting at.
Yeah.
What recourse do you have? It's in the agreement
Well,
that
yeah.
that ASCO needs, if they don't meet their savings, then they start writing checks.
That's
So-
correct.
Or make modifications.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At their own expense.
Right. Yes, thank you. Tim, is that responsive?
Yeah, I think the lease might be the simpler contract, the one that's the most important. And I was just going to say that I think that the lease agreement might be the simplest of the two. The GSA is the one where all the, as they say, where the beef is.
Right, and I think we're about to get to some of those
That's exactly right.
complexities.
Um,
So you're now up to,
all right, yeah, so
Measurement
we've talked
verification.
about, we're up to measurement and verification. I turn it back to JB.
I'm back. Okay. Let me just underscore because of the questions. As we get into measurement and verification, because this is going to be the process by which you find out the performance is as promised, okay? The model is built on a trusted advisor function through the execution, through the sale of the bonds. We are there to help you all the steps through, as Baird has indicated. All of the contracts are common contracts, and we will work with you each of these steps in each of the contracts to make sure that they are there. It's not a guarantee, but I do want you to know the vetting of these companies is fairly extensive. They are all required to give a full 5-year record of every guaranteed savings agreement that is lodged against the company, and they must report if there has been a failure. And if there has been a failure, what was done to cure it. So we have a fairly significant record already on file. And in the template RFP, essentially you would get the same data that we have already looked through very carefully in order to make sure that these companies are included. Again, it's not finally a guarantee, and the best way to do that is what Keith indicates, which is to, if you have a concern on that level, is that you take out an insurance facility that will protect you. But I just want you to understand, we do this this is a deep dive. This is not your usual RFQ, if you will, okay? This is a fairly deep dive. I want to quickly mention we require them to give us 10 projects that we then independently contact to make sure of how the performance went and what the views of the clients were in that regard, okay? We will keep track of data, which is now I'm going to go into monitoring and verification. We will have access both to databases that are independent of the project, and as Baird indicated, we've got a lot of data both on the projects of the participants and the projects that the ESCOs have performed in the last 5 years. That data will be used to benchmark for you what is the performance level you're giving. You're making the pledge, as our colleague identified, you're making the pledge to pay the debt, okay? You shouldn't make that pledge unless you've got a guarantee that backs it that is number one, right? And that's what we're trying to make sure will happen. We will work with you step by step, measure by measure, if that's what you need, to go through and benchmark those results and say whether those results meet what are the reasonable expectations, what's the track record in the industry, what's the track record on that technology, and so on, okay? So we will really work with you extensively on that. Please.
With that said, is there anything in the program that provides for, I guess, commissioning or third-party verification? Or is it the
Yes.
ESCO that did the contract that's doing all the MNV and reporting?
So in the negotiating phase, before you get to the actual commissioning of the project, we will help you on that level. We are offering This is not something we were necessarily going to discuss today, but we are offering optional services where we can either help you with commissioning during construction and post-construction, or if you prefer, if you have a third party, and we'd be happy to make recommendations on good third-party performers for this. It is a good idea, I think, particularly if you have a complex project, it's a good idea to make sure that you've got a third party in there as part of the process, and that cost can be included in the in the financing itself. You can include that third party costing. Okay, so that is very, very important, and there are a variety of ways to do that. We will offer a purely optional, volunteer-based. If you want it, we will do it kind of thing. But we will also be happy to guide you to independent third-party verifiers. Okay. To make measurement and verification work, you need a benchmark of how much were you paying against how much are you going to save. The program, not the ESCO, sets the price of energy and of water out through the period of the debt service, okay? So the program does that, not. I have brought copies of what we have circulating now, but you will if you want to see it, but we are circulating. We are not yet finally publishing the numbers, but we have the energy escalators ready, and we are meeting with ESCOs shortly to go over this matter. But we will set it, okay? It's based upon entirely independent and objective data that is analyzed by my team, and we come up with escalators, which I can assure you the first thing that we're going to be told at the meeting on escalators by the ESCOs is they're too low. And our view is that we make them what we think is conservative because you are taking the obligation to pay. We are then making sure that the guarantee that you're getting is readily met. Keeping the escalation rate low means that you will benefit if, in fact, prices move higher than what we have. And one of the sources that we use is the U.S. Energy Information Administration in order to produce these escalators. The track record of the U.S. Energy Information Administration, any forecaster of energy prices is always wrong, but they have a very consistent record, okay, that they are always low. Our recommended escalator rates are a little bit below the U.S. Energy Information Administration in order to protect participants' interest on these kinds of matters. So that's a really very big thing there off the top. Fixed escalator rates, we set those, and then the escalators must perform against that 20-year record of how much the price is going to be without the invention versus what your cost is in your bill with that intervention. The dollar savings are guaranteed in this regard, because everybody knows to sign a contract. You know what the actual dollar value guarantee is for each year of the debt service. Okay, so it's already known in advance because we've already set the escalators in place. The prices are already there, and you already know then what savings must be provided. We only count energy and water savings, not because there shouldn't be additional savings for you, but again, as Baird indicated, rating agencies and others will look at this more conservatively. In our view, that is good for you. What is our experience in doing this? Every single entity in the Delaware case, there's one that the construction wasn't fully finished, but if you take all the construction, all the projects that had completed construction, every single one is saving more than the guarantee. And that is basically our mission, to make sure that we produce outcome like that. The verification process is through, if you're not a geek, as someone pointed out, I'm from a university as well. I wear two hats for the foundation and then for the university. My geek life on the university side is to know things like this lovely chart here on inelegantly identifying the major protocols that measure performance. They are called, you can tell geeks put it together, it's called option A, B, C, and D, right? I mean, can't get much duller than that, and we're good at dull, and that's what so these are well defined. These are internationally accepted protocols. The U.S. Department of Energy was part of the process of putting these protocols together. We will give you a monitoring and verification guidance as we move forward, but basically, option A is a good idea if it's something very simple, like changing out lighting. Option D is very important if you have a complex project in which there's a lot of interaction going on, to make sure that we can find the data to support what that guarantee is. It also runs, as you can probably imagine, option A is the low-cost version of M&B. Option D is the high-cost version of M&V, and we will work with you to look at what those relative costs are like and whether it is worth your while to up that M&V. We'd be happy to discuss that with you in order to make sure, again, that you're going to have confidence year in, year out. Now, as Baird mentioned, we do it on a quarterly basis because we have moved the monitoring and verification model away from my expert argues with your expert over whether or not you look at the bill and you say, I don't see any savings. He says, oh yeah, it's right there. And you say, no, I don't see it. Instead of that, this is a diagnostic model. You already know the amount of savings you are to receive. And the quarterly tells the ESCO whether they are going to meet, and if they are not going to meet, to begin the discussion of what needs to be done in order to make sure that you get the savings that are guaranteed under the GSA, okay? So that's a very important part of the process. Also,
For the more complex M&V options there, C and D, who's responsible for taking into account changing building usage patterns,
Right.
et cetera, over time? Is it the
Very
ESCO
good.
has to gather that information, or the?
that's right. You're going to have to report, as a participant, you're going to have to report changes that might happen in that regard, and there may be adjustments in the baseline to reflect if the building's purpose has been changed in a significant way that's now meaning that you're not going to be able to get the savings you once thought you were going to get.
And the
The-
process for doing that is set out in the
In the
Guaranteed
contracts.
Energy Savings Agreement. You know, there's a a protocol and a method of recalibrating that's all set out.
Does the ESCO, if the participant says my building usage changed in this particular fashion, does the ESCO have a means of independently verifying that, auditing that, checking that?
Well, I'm sure, yes. I mean, I'm not sure independently. They would, in a cooperative relation with you, they would come in and they would re-measure the baseline, okay? But you're part of the process. You're going to have to accept or not, and part of the reason why third party, or in our case, if you want our approach, why somebody like that is useful is particularly in the first few years of a project. Things like this can happen. You want to make sure that your interests are protected under that guarantee.
Well, one other question on certain applications, solar. Solar is weather dependent, has a fairly good variability in output from year to year. How do you account for that? I mean, if you use an average expected production level, but you have a particularly bad year,
So in most remember, you're borrowing the money by one means, or you're purchasing the power by one means or another, okay? Either through a power purchase agreement or by. But most solar projects use what is called TMY data, typical meteorological, okay? Which is a 30-year based average, okay, of what you're going to see. There can be changes in that. The less important thing is whether there's changes in the near term than whether or not you're seeing poor performance over an extended period of time. And part of the reason, again, to have that independent verification process is to make sure, but please remember, if I'm selling you, if I'm in a power purchase agreement relationship with you, I make money the more kilowatt hours I can sell you. I don't want my equipment to perform poorly. If my equipment performs poorly, you pay less, okay? So I very much want to make sure that I'm keeping that equipment. Still, having that third party or independent verification process, I think, remains just as important as it would on the energy saving side.
Yeah, but a typical power purchase agreement is just that. You pay for the megawatts
Only
you
for-
actually get.
That's right.
So as long as you have, reduced prices, you're paying less for megawatt, so you're saving money all in. You're not taking on, in that circumstance, you're not directly taking on the debt, and that's something that we'll work through because you're going to have a third-party owner and so forth.
That's right.
Do we have to maintain the M&V the entire length of the contract? The reason why I ask is from the ECMs, I mean, if you could get through 2-3 years and you feel confident that they're reaching their savings every year, you know, we often have the option to not then pay for the additional M&V and sign off on the guarantee. Do we have that option under this program still?
Yes, you do have that option.
Okay. Yeah, you have that option, and it's a very important one, as you note. A lot of times, this kind of work is going to, if there's a problem, it's going to show up in the first few years, and then it may show up in an overstatement of the end of life experience. But usually, it's going to happen in the first few years, and if you then become happy with it, you can move it out. We actually financed one in a community college case that did exactly that. So. Now, let me just present to you, because I said I would, a practical example of why this program can provide you more negotiation power than you might have if you just tried to do this on your own. In a financing that we did in Delaware, we had several metrics that we measured the guaranteed savings agreement against, and one of those was, what's the cost per energy unit saved for M&V? So how much are you paying to have yours monitored and verified against yours, okay, per energy unit saved? And if we then looked at the mix of option A through option D and you looked similar, okay, we could then ask, well, what's the difference? And we actually found outliers, not only on this metric but others. We found outliers, and originally the company tried to convince its client that they had sort of special secret sauce in their M&V that other M&V didn't have, but it lasted about one day. And the company then came back to the client and said, you know, we did a little pencil work on this and we figured out that we ought to move a bit more toward, so that's part of the process that a pooled financing gives you in terms of leverage, why we are very much wanting that program agreement to make sure that all the data is in so that we can help you utilize that leverage. Without your pledge of payment, there can be no transaction. You are the key. Therefore, we should make sure that you are in the best position to get the guarantee that underlies the investment itself. And that, I don't think, I mean, unless you have more questions, I'm always happy to answer questions on monitoring and verification, but
I just want the record to reflect that Keith pitched a perfect game.
Well,
Some sharp fielding behind me, I have to admit.
well, okay. Let's just see if we can capture maybe one or two more questions and then break for lunch. But first, before we do that, if you're a resource in the room, because I know there are, so like Pat and Bruce are resources in the room, during lunch, really take an opportunity to engage with folks that might be a resource in the room. You want to raise your hands if you're...
Pat and Bruce and Pam are all...
Pam are resources. Marilyn has a knowledge base as well.
Yes.
So, okay. So I think maybe the strategy here is to have lunch, and then why don't we close by allowing the panel to maybe distill the kind of conversations that are happening over lunch and see if it brings up any other issues. That could be a short conversation or it could be a long conversation. But let's have lunch and then reconvene. But we have a couple more questions first.
If I were a skeptic of the Treasury, where would I go for your list of references for the program? We keep our fund balance in our mattress. Just
So, my references or their references?
no, for the program. I mean, different organizations or schools or whomever that's been in the program. Where is that list?
People in I think we can get you, or
Yeah,
we can
we
put
can
up on the
give you that.
website, the participants in Delaware for sure,
Yes.
because that's already almost fully implemented.
That's right.
And what's the timeline on the program that you're trying to introduce here? Is there dates that you have to enroll by, or you're looking?
Well, we're trying now, for the obvious reason, we're trying to get a financing sometime in the summer so that there would be construction opportunity because, for example, school districts and some other entities have a need to have some construction begin during that period. So we are trying to get to the market, and we are trying to work with a number of projects that are now in a pipeline that we're trying to move out.
Yeah.
But that said, the program we're hoping the program proves very reliable and helpful to you, and we will do it on an ongoing basis. We see this as a continuing program rather than a one-off.
So if you're not in the first bond train, you can catch the next bond train. That's the message. We obviously want the first train to leave the station so that people can see that it works, and we get some publicity associated with that. But then as many deals as we can put together that meet the minimum are the number of deals we'll do.
I guess the last question I have is, how do you show the difference between a school district just doing a regular reimbursable PDE project versus this program?
Well, I guess you will have a very different. Well, if you there's two tracks you could be on. You said you do a regular program. If you go down just a regular construction contracting program with hire your own engineer to decide what it is you want to do, and then hire a construction contractor. You won't hire one; you'll hire three. You'll take a 3 separate RFPs. You'll get low-cost bids. And you will get a construction contract that is maybe a modified AIA construction contract that doesn't have testing specs built into it, so they have to get written specially if somebody writes them at all. You won't have somebody. You won't have the various kinds of advice the program can give, but you'll have whoever your usual engineering consultants are, and you'll proceed as you do. If you did a guaranteed savings agreement, then it would look more like this, but your leverage would be less, and to the extent you're financing things, you're not going to get a much better rate. And depending on the other thing that happens here is, if you have a $20 million project, you could go bond it yourself, and that would be easy enough. If you have a $5 million project, hardly makes sense to do a bond issue. Maybe you'll do a tax-exempt lease. You'll start getting, the rates will start moving away from what you saw on the slide there. So, I think basically what I'd say is we provide incremental leverage at several points in the process.
And if I could just follow up on the point too, when we did look at the earlier program that the state had, we looked at what the borrowing rates were. This is mostly bank based borrowing, and the savings of this program compared to what were the real borrowings that were done under the state program is about $130,000 on every $1 million borrowed. Okay, this assumed a 15-year length and somewhere between an A and a AA rated entity. So I think the savings on this program are significant. The ability to have that trusted advisor function that you don't have to uniquely pay for, the fact that you're spreading the transaction costs among the pool rather than you having to bear it all yourself, all of these can add benefit to you. As Baird indicated, if you've got the $20 million in your capital account, you want to spend it on your own. Nobody can. Then that's certainly the best way to go. But if you don't have that option, we think we can offer you a number of benefits that would not be present if you tried to do it as an individual project on your own. Is that responsive to what you're?
In the back, one of our resources.
Yes.
And I can't make it to the education day. Can I speak to the qualified ASCOs independently of that day?
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
And then continue with the
It's a
process?
very good question. Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
The education day is to make it easier for you to participate, not a gateway to participation. There may be value in any given participant seeing the other participants, sharing stories about what's working, what's not working, seeing all the ESCOs arrayed so you get some better sense of their relative capabilities, whether one strikes your fancy, et cetera. But all those things we think are benefits, but they're not requirements. So if we're going to break for lunch, the one thing I want to say before we do that, because I want to catch everyone while they're still here, is that I need to pay note a debt that we have to the West Penn Power Sustainable Energy Fund.
One more pen.
Yeah, one more pen, yes. A lot of upfront work has gone into getting us to this point, as you might imagine, and a lot more upfront work will be involved in meeting with you if you have a project, helping you with technical assistance, helping you with RFPs, negotiating, et cetera, and that isn't free. F-R-E-E, small letters. That will be free, but we have this problem every time I give this presentation. And so to get here, we are the very, very grateful beneficiaries of a large grant that the West Penn Power Sustainable Energy Fund made to Treasury in order to engage free and at least provide some compensation for their out-of-pocket costs to get the bond deal. So I just want to note that this project has support in a number of ways from a number of different sectors, including all the SEFs in Pennsylvania who are on our advisory board, and West Penn in particular, that has provided that grant I just mentioned. So with that, with visions of $150,000, dangling in your eyes, I commend you to lunch.
So if you're watching this on camera, then no time has passed, but we are now all full of at least 4 sandwiches. So thanks and welcome back. So I guess at this point, really what we want to do is try to capture as many questions as we can, but I also invite the resources in the room to sort of relay discussions that maybe they had during lunch and maybe allow that to elicit some conversations that'll be good for getting into some of the details of the program. So I'll leave it open to the floor, and please raise your hand. I'll bring you the mic. All right.
This is actually, I'm Bruce Stoltz. I'm with the Free. And this is more of just to bring up a topic, and it has to do with measurement and verification and the various number of energy conservation measures. In the past, what I've noticed is some of those carry more risk than others, hence we have the different variations of opportunities for A, B, C, and D. And historically, coming new into a project opportunity, we may be taking a look at this as one total scope and worrying about risk or guarantee when really we have to break it down by energy conservation measure. So I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about the differences in approach, say like between lighting and ability management system when you evaluate measurement and verification.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. That is very important for all of us in this area. It really does need to be done by conservation measure. We include water and energy, so I just want to make that clear too, and it's all the energy sources. But you do need to, on this monitoring and verification, break it down so that it is measured, it's assigned by measure. Now, in some cases, there may be a set of measures that actually, for example, on taking out a boiler and replacing it with a more efficient boiler, there may be a series of steps that actually work together, and so you need to sort of bundle those measures. But generally speaking, the way that this will go and the way the M&V schedule will look in an agreement is it'll be by measure or by these small bundles of measures. On the risk factor, there are some things that once you put them in, obviously if you have some sort of sensor technology that turns on and off lights, and if there's not much traffic through the room, the lights are not going to turn on very much, and so the savings that had been expected might be low. So you do need to take into account that sensor function and how the room is being used as part of the effort to estimate that saving. But generally speaking, lighting is one of those technologies, as Bruce is bringing up, that pretty much doesn't vary from 1 hour for a period of time. The building is open, the lighting is on. You get the savings that you're going to get from that technology on a fairly continuous basis. For that reason, because the risk is relatively low of variation in the savings, what is called option A, which is basically an algorithm. You just calculate what is the requirements, the energy requirements to light that unit versus this unit. you can pretty much take that as a basis for saying that these savings can be guaranteed at that level. It's very low cost. M&V is very inexpensive. Your risk is very low, and so it's a good opportunity. But if you're talking about something like, for example, the makeup of air in the room, that whether you want cold or hot and whatever you're after on that's has many variables involved. And using option A for something like that sometimes cannot be good for you. And having an ability to then see how those variables interact and get a more accurate depiction of what the likely savings are going to be might bump you into either option B or option C. Option D, I think, for most applications is not that you're going to find, for example, in school buildings and township offices and things like that won't be necessary. So option D is really, I think, often more for an industrial process than it is for, but you might see an option B or an option C. And what we would do, Bruce is part of this team, what we would do is try and help you figure out what is the risk of error in the estimation that you get by B against C, and try and then work out what would be, on the one hand, the cost effective, and on the other hand, the low risk. What you want is to sort of marry risk and cost at an affordable level for that purpose, okay? So that's what we would do. We would work with you measure by measure, or bundles of measure by measure, to help you in that regard. And we've got a guidance that we've written and sort of circulating within the team. When we think that the guidance is reasonably well written and understandable and not too geeky, we will put it on the website so that you'll have an M&V guidance that can help you for this particular purpose, okay? It's not a substitute for some hard work that will be needed when the GIZA gets looked at, but we think it at least gives you some basis for looking at the trade-off risk and cost, okay? Are there questions about, incidentally, I mean, I'm buzzing through option A, B, C, and D as though everybody on the planet knew what the hell that was, but would it be helpful to spend just a minute on that, or? If we don't have too many facilities people, I know we've got a couple of engineers in the room, so they know what it is, but for the most part, so option A is largely, if you will, a manual base. There's already a determination. It's been published. It's been checked by laboratory testing, and it's now published. And option A is just basically somebody pulls the proper manual out and writes in what the what the savings are. So it's very, very low cost. Option B is to take into account that for example, that lighting technology, which by itself may be very simple, but if you've got like I said, you've got something that's turning the lights on and off automatically, then you'd want to take the interaction between the lighting and that sensor or the other method that turns the lights on automatically, okay? And for that, you come in, you do a little bit of measuring about how often the lights turn on, how many hours they stay on, and that kind of thing. You sample for a period of time. That's sort of option B. Option C, you're building a model that the lighting is heating your room to some extent. One of the reasons why we air condition throughout most of the year, even though it's been chilly this winter, but we're still air conditioning many buildings, is because the loads, including light loads, can heat a room to a level that becomes uncomfortable. And so, oddly enough, when it's at a period of cold weather outside, we still end up sometimes using air conditioning. That kind of interaction is more complex. It has more technologies involved, and it, as a result, is more model-based. It's trying to put together a reasonable model that can predict well what's happening. It's more statistical. Option D, you come in with sensors. You come in and you actually measure everything with sensors, and that's quite expensive. That's A, B, C, and D.
If the guarantee is based on energy and water, and operational savings and deferred maintenance are not counted within the savings, but they are there at some point. Can you speak to what operational savings and deferred maintenance savings may be?
You want to do it?
I don't care.
I just stammered.
Sure.
My voice.
Operational savings could be a variety of things, but in particular like labor costs. And there are in fact limits in the Act on counting labor costs for certain kinds of measures. The state, in passing the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act, didn't want to be sort of throwing lots of school employees out of work. That wasn't the purpose of adopting the Act.
Right.
And in any event, those are savings that don't come from the equipment and may change over time. On the other hand, deferred maintenance, I mean, if you've got a boiler that's 20 years old and you're putting several $1,000s worth of emergency repairs into it every year, you can make that go away when you have a new boiler, and it won't start again, and not, for 5 years, and even then it won't be nearly as bad. So those are savings that you're going to get, but it's not a sort of an ongoing savings so much, and it's not being counted here, but for purposes of financing, but you will realize those savings.
Just to piggyback on Baird's point, as a result, the approach we're taking means that you should see more benefit to your bottom line than will be in the guarantee. That's the better way to do this, right? I mean, you want the guarantee to be, in that sense, an estimate, but never an overestimate. And by having operational savings as additional, you're almost, for many of these different technologies, you're gonna see better savings than what you see in the guaranteed savings.
Well, and that goes just for the energy savings themselves. In other words, the ESCOs who are putting their balance sheet behind making a guarantee to you are going to be conservative about what they guarantee. They expect the performance of the equipment to actually be substantially better than what they're guaranteeing, and that's their margin of safety in terms of making the contract. So there are levels of conservatism. Everybody has an incentive to be conservative.
First off, I hope you get a $50 million issue first go round. You'll have a story to tell, and it'll be a great. I just really think that's what you're doing is wonderful, and it'll get easier after you get the first one done. The question I have has to do with all of the references that you've made to the Act and how it pertains, I believe, to public entities. For organizations like ours that are nonprofit, 501c3, could there, and I will do this as you start going through this, try to make a list of things that just don't apply. The nonprofits can do things differently. Obviously, we don't appropriate funds, and those little things will send some of my members kind of sort of sideways, and they start reading this. But are there anything that about the issuing authority, about the issuing procedures about that you see as obstacles for nonprofits?
Actually, everything is easier for the nonprofits, basically. I mean, first of all, the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act doesn't apply. You don't need any special authorization because there's no set of requirements that you use particular procurement processes in the normal course. You can make your own policies on procurement and follow them however you want. So, and so therefore you don't need the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act to get out of them. The Unit Debt Act doesn't apply because if you're not a governmental unit, your debt limit is prudential and what the rating agencies will allow, not a matter of law. So basically, you can select an ESCO in the manner that most appeals to you. If you want to use the form of the RFP, you certainly can. You certainly can hold them to the 90% test on the preliminary audit to the guarantee, to the investment grade audit.
Right.
But but sort of none of that applies to the nonprofits, and nothing else applies. The only and probably all your colleges and sophisticated nonprofits are already thinking hard about the fact that they're issuing tax-exempt debt and what the limitations are on issuing tax-exempt debt. There's nothing special here that will affect that in any way. So long as you're not, giving a long-term operating contract to an ESCO, if what you're doing is just, hiring construction work done by an ESCO, none of that will affect anything to do with your existing eligibility for tax-exempt bonds. So you really, for the nonprofits, it's just easier.
We've operated a pool. We call it a pool. It never was a pool, but a gathering of like-minded institutions to borrow at the same time and divide the costs of that issuance. One of the sticking points with one of our state authorities is the obligation that they abide by the public requirement of Davis-Bacon, and some of our institutions do as a matter of practice, but they never expect the authority to be dictating that. So as you start to develop this program, it would be helpful to know that flexibility is retained by the nonprofit.
Again, there's no procurement law that applies to nonprofits as such. So the Davis-Bacon requirements, which do apply, by the way, to the governmental units in this program, are not, by virtue of the program, applicable to any other borrower. I've had a conversation with Steve Drizos at PEDFA to the effect that there are no policies that they are imposing that would require Davis-Bacon or its equal to apply to nonprofits.
But another authority does, and we've sort of had a problem with that authority.
Sure. Yeah.
So, thank you.
So I actually will bring up a question about the first step in this process. The letter of intent or the letter of interest as a first step to engagement with PennCEF, the PennCEF program, what does that commit you to?
It doesn't commit you to anything. It makes sure that you get invited to the education day, and that you're on our horizon to start making sure if you need help that you get help. I guess what the letter of intent says basically is that you would like to begin a process, an RFP process, to get a preliminary audit and see how, you want to start the process. But there's no commitment to the process once you start it, until you get way down the road of signing a guaranteed energy savings agreement. And even then, the commitment is only to pay for the audit if in fact it comes in within that 90% band.
And you get a chance to look at the letter, which is in
the letter,
the handout.
a copy of the letter is at the back of the handout.
You'll see it also gives you a basic sense of what are the benefits, the ingredients of the program as well. So the letter is trying to make sure that you're aware of what those benefits are.
No, there was a slide about which ECMs or measures were included in the program. Are there any ECMs or renewables that are excluded?
The only real exclusion is if it cannot save energy and water at a volume that is equal to or greater than the debt. We don't have any need to screen out particular ones. We might offer to you, for example, on renewables, sometimes because the federal government has certain tax advantages, you may want to bring a third-party entity in because of those tax advantages. That may get you a better price, and we would work with you for that purpose. I think it was asked in the first session about a hybrid model. I think you maybe were the source of the question. So we will work with you on that and try and help you think that through. But there are really the main thing is if it's going to save energy and water costs to you and your bills on a ongoing basis equal to or greater than the debt service, and for the period of the debt service, then we can keep it in. There is a finding that's needed, Baird, maybe there's a finding that any participant must.
Right, and that's even an aggregate finding. I mean,
Yeah.
there, as I said,
That's
I
what
think
it is.
sometime in the morning there's, a 15% portion of any such contract that can be for things that aren't aimed at energy savings, so long as all in the energy savings pay for the contract. So, yeah, that's pretty straightforward. Let me, one of the things I was asked about at lunch, and follows on the question over here, for those that are local government units, and that a local government unit really is anything that is governmental in any way. That, you know, it's the schools, it's the community colleges, it's the state colleges, it's not the private colleges, but as well as actual municipalities and county governments and so forth, or any municipal authority, and water and sewer authorities and folks like that definitely could be included in this program. For all the governments, they are generally subject to something called the Local Government Unit Debt Act. Some people call it LAGUDA, some people just say the Unit Debt Act, whatever. And that does, that imposes a statutory debt limit on all those bodies that relates to their overall budget and their source of revenues. And there's one limit that applies to all general obligation debt. There's usually a separate higher limit that applies to leases, and then, but the third factor is if your obligation is subject to appropriation, so that you don't have an obligation that's longer than the current fiscal year, that's not subject to appropriation. It isn't debt within the meaning of the Local Unit Debt Act at all. So you simply aren't limited in entering into this contract by your debt limit. You don't have to go through the processes under the Local Unit Government Debt Act that you have to go through to incur new debt if you are subject to the act. So you really can just sort of set that on the side and not worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the piece that will tie all that together is that you'll see that the contracts that are recommended here would make the repayment of the debt to the issuer subject to appropriation. And so now that your obligation is subject to appropriation, it's not a kind of binding debt pledged by the moral authority of the government or general obligation of the government, et cetera, and therefore it's subject to different rules for LAGUDA purposes. I mean, so this debt is not subject to appropriation because that's the way the contract will read, because that's the way the GISA Act requires those obligations.
It is subject to appropriation.
Sorry, it is subject to appropriation.
Right.
Right, because that's what the statute requires.
That's what the lease, it's required by the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act that the debt say that, and that is then reflected in the lease.
I had a question that maybe we can provide some. Do you have another question? I didn't mean to cut you off. No. That maybe the panel can provide some guidance for. At least one person was mentioning that they in the past had been in situations where they were able to sort of solicit multiple preliminary audit proposals from ESCOs, and that gave them some flexibility. And that's not precisely the way this works. So anyone want to sort of talk a little bit about that aspect?
Well, yeah, first of all, you could. I mean, you know, you can run two separate RFPs, or say, you know, under this RFP we'll accept, you know, one bid for everything, or one proposal for everything, or we'll look at separate proposals for separate parts. So you could, in fact, subdivide what you want to do, and look to different ESCOs. It is, in terms of the mechanics, unless there's a good reason to do that, and you want integrated performance, and especially if you want integrated performance, there are benefits to having a single responsible party. So that's just a call that you would have to make. Yeah, there was another point there, but I can't remember what it is, so it'll come back to me later.
Okay.
I just, maybe, I'm sure it's not the point, but I do think that another consideration is if you craft the RFP properly, you should be able to sort of spot who the dance partner is, who the best dance partner is for you. And I think sometimes trying to get into 2 or 3 and having interviews and scoring here, there, and everywhere can tie you up in a lot of time without necessarily a whole lot of benefit, okay? But that said, when the RFP goes out, you will have meetings in advance, and you can be assured that the ESCOs will come as long as they're told. They will come, and they will be there to talk with you and give you their pitch.
We don't guarantee that ESCOs will choose to put in competing preliminary audits. I don't think, I mean, it's an expensive process, and that's why we sort of set it up in steps where you have a first response to the RFP and you have interviews, whatever you want to do, but not a lot of the ESCOs would commit to putting the effort into a preliminary audit unless they know you have preliminarily selected them. If you had a big enough project or separate enough, 2 different campuses or whatever it is, that it makes sense for it to be 2 projects, that might not be an issue. The thought I had earlier was that you can customize the RFP in a lot of different ways. It's a very flexible process. And we mentioned earlier a proposal, I can't remember if we did it sort of in the group or just in a private discussion, but we're working with the Regional Planning Commission in Philadelphia to do a program for LED streetlights for a whole group of municipalities. And some very small municipalities are going to be able to participate because it'll be a single procurement that's mostly about just buying the lighting fixtures. And unlike a procurement where you're really going to be saying, okay, come evaluate everything in my building and give me 26 measures that will improve it, you're saying, we want somebody to focus on our street lighting. We've got a consultant. We think these are the right kinds of lights. Tell us the pricing you're going to get on these lights. And, as a big part of what you're going to do. So you can make it look more like a traditional RFP if that's what makes sense in the context.
And I just want to reinforce, we had a conversation with a county department exec and another entity during the lunch hour, and the same question came up. So if I am in a county, can I bundle together municipalities that might want to do a number of different things? And we had a conversation on the private colleges where you could possibly bundle. In the case of one of the California efforts that we did, there was a number of small school districts who perhaps on their own might not have been able to do much, but we were able to put them together. It is important that you've got a similar rating, but that's something also that we can deal with, but they could pull together a number of school districts and thereby allow participation and to get to a scale. If you choose an ESCO and you scale that way by bundling, that a lot of times can save you a lot of money and it can get you the kind of benefits of a program like this. So I do think aggregation is an important option, and we ought to keep that in mind, and we will work with you on that. Baird's been working on this Regional Planning Commission effort and has made some real inroads, so everybody will benefit because he's now thought through how to bundle together a number of different units of government, and it can be also from the private nonprofit sector as well. So I think we have some ideas on that we'd be happy to work with you on. If you find some of the discussion here today, for example, is just like, I'm a small district and I don't have that much opportunity, I wouldn't necessarily give up. I think there are ways in which we can help you bundle and keep your precious capital and operating budget for the things that schools are supposed to be providing, and as I said earlier, let the private sector invest in your facilities.
I'll ask a question, and then maybe we'll try to wrap it up, see if there's maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and then wrap it up. But I think from the perspective of some of the public entities in this room, the ESCO process has been high pressure, as in they opened the door and then couldn't close it again. So when you submit this letter of intent, are you opening the door for all your pre-approved contractors to be calling you ad nauseum, knock down your door, that kind of thing? How is this program sort of mediating that relationship?
So there are a couple ways in which that mediation can take place. You can tell us what you want, and if you don't want them knocking on your door, or if you want to meet them at the education day and not more than that, we can certainly set up the process, and we can certainly communicate with them about this. So the ESCOs, you know, they earned their reputation, such as it is, and but I do think that this program is different. I hope we were successful in communicating this to you. We are there as your trusted advisor because of the efforts of both Treasury and West Bend Power Sustainable Energy Fund. So you don't need to have as much fear as you might have had before about ESCOs. We can keep them at bay if that's what you want. If you want them to come in and, you know, there was a question about could I have multiple ESCOs bid in an RFP, we can help you with that. If you want to do one, we can help you with that. If you want them to stay on the sidelines and let us work with you to get through the documentation and things until you're comfortable, we'll do that.
I mean, I might just say on that front that how a particular potential sponsor approaches the question of, is my door open so wide that all the vampires, you know, feel invited in, which, as you may recall from Buffy, is the only way a vampire can come into your home.
I missed that.
Yeah, no, that's the basic premise. They can get on your porch, but they can't cross the threshold unless you actually invite them in. A home is always your sanctuary, John. Just remember. But so.
And we have a holly tree nursery out back.
Right.
Oh, no.
The different sponsors are going to be in a different point of departure for this process.
Yeah.
So some sponsors may already know or think they know exactly what they want done, and therefore they may benefit from having a much smaller number of ESCOs, you know, importuning them because they kind of just need someone to do the job. Someone else may say, my facility is 100 years old, I've upgraded nothing. It's a target-rich environment out here, and I have no idea how to figure out what to do. That might be someone who would be interested, despite the friction that it may create, of having, you know, multiple ESCOs, at least pitching ideas, so you get a sense of what the possible really is. I don't know that there's any one way to answer that. Each sponsor is going to bring its own set of expectations, sort of expertise levels, and existing assessment of its own capabilities. And so we would certainly be able to work with you to try and do a little hand-holding about where you are in that process, and give you some suggestions as to whether you're here's the best ESCO for you, and we can tell you what's the easiest way to just get to that ESCO, or whether you're the person who would benefit from having all 15 ESCOs at least drop off a card because you might learn something from each of them. Sure. I mean, so to some extent, the TA that we offer is designed to make this as bespoke as it can be for each participant based on what its actual needs turn out to be.
Well said.
Great.
From Treasury.
Right.
Yeah.
And he says that as though he's surprised.
I don't
Never
see
at this individual, let me tell you.
I don't see any other questions from the audience, but I'll just go ahead and for the benefit of the folks that may be watching this online, hopefully just a few weeks after this presentation, what resources could they expect to see on the PennCef website, and then how does using that website become a channel to program participation?
So the website has all of the documents from lease to RFP to GIZA. We have more still that we'll be putting on, but it has all of the basic documents of the program. It regularly reports on the indicative rates for the program, so it's always there. It has basic information on the 8 steps for participation, so that in case you didn't memorize or you lose your booklet, it's okay. Everything is there. We have a lot of information on participation, a lot of information on finance. The finance diagram that Baird drafted and showed you, that's there in case you got lost in the spokes somewhere. So the finance is covered extensively, the documentation is covered extensively, and then we have the more general statements about the program itself. What are the overall benefits? What are the different things that you can focus in on in order to make this customized for your particular needs? in a little bit more time, we're going to have some guidances and some policies and things that we'll be putting on now that you don't see yet. I mentioned the escalators. That will be up soon after we've had that conversation. Bruce Stoltz asked a question on monitoring and verification, the risk against cost. We will have a guidance on that you can look at and learn from and that kind of thing. So it's a pretty robust, I would say, page for you to find a lot of information on the program.
And in particular, in regard to the question over here about the nonprofits, there will be both the government unit lease form and the non-governmental lease form.
That's right.
There's also, by the way, and this may go without saying, the ESCOs are there as well. So the list,
Sorry, yes,
you
the
wanna-
list
you wanna
of
deal with that?
qualified ESCOs, yes, are there. And I do want to, so that you have an idea, we do take that part very, very seriously. That review process is extensive. I would say the average reply we get is in the 1.5 gigabyte size, so it is a very extensive statement of qualifications, and we look page by page to try and make sure that the record is there that would justify their participation. Okay, but yes, you're right, and all of the points of contact, each ESCO, as you might expect, has named who they want you to contact if you so choose. Okay?
Very good. Great. Well, seeing no more questions, I think if there are any closing remarks, and we'll call that a wrap for a very information-rich and hopefully beneficial meeting for the school district and municipal representatives that are in the room. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Right. So thank you. I guess my only closing remarks are, I always preface this by saying only, as though they'd be short. We're really grateful for everyone who came and listened. Particularly good questions today, very, very excellent questions, which allowed us to, I think, develop some points in depth that we only covered preliminarily and identify other issues that we just didn't have on our list. So glad that we got to that level of detail. And I always sort of end, not to preempt these two fine gentlemen, but I end by saying, at the end of the day, at this stage of the process, we're in a reactive mode. We can present this to you, we can call you up and do some follow-up, but ultimately you need to come to us and say, we have a project that we'd like to explore, or we know we must have projects out here, we need to figure out where they are, help us explore them. We can't make you do this. We don't want to make you do it. If you're not interested, you're not interested. But we need you to take that first step and say, okay, Free, what is it that I need to do now so that I can figure out what my projects are and get on the road towards selecting a firm to help me with that. If you don't respond, we just sit up here and have more meetings like this and talk about that first bond deal that we want to do, and we never get there. So that's really where we are. We're now turning it over to you to take that first step.
I think you've heard our voices enough, so well said.